The Japanese Bresson is what many have dubbed this 1930s photographer. He was one of the first to bring a more modern take on street photography to the streets of Ginza in post-war Japan. He did this through a snapshot aesthetic and a focus on realism by always relying on natural light and capturing environments and people just as they appeared without manipulation. He helped shape the philosophy and techniques that would go on to evolve and revolutionize Japanese photography in a way that has continued to evolve ever since, giving it the distinct characteristics that it has today, all while creating images that heavily focused on giving humanity to any of the subjects that he photographed. This humanity comes through in his own words, reflecting on why he was able to create his powerful photos, stating, "Fall in love with your subject matters. If not, you can't take good pictures." This is Street Smart's Ihei Kimura. Ihei Kimura was born in 1901. He turned to photography in the form of a box camera when he was really young and living in Taiwan, which quickly led to an obsession with the medium. This motivated him to move back to Tokyo and start his own studio at the age of 23. By the 1930s, the innovation that came through Leica's newly formed compact 35mm cameras allowed Kimura to explore all of his curiosities about photography more thoroughly and develop the style that he later became known for. Pictorialism was the name of the game at the time in photography. Despite this, or maybe as a result, Kimura was eventually drawn to capturing more sporadic frames in the form of street photography all around Tokyo. This difference in technique set him apart from many of the photographers of his day, and it's what's allowed his work to stand the test of time. He first found his voice by breaking away from the philosophy of photography that informed so much of what was being made in the 1930s, by latching onto voices that were calling for change similar to him all over the globe. Ihei, along with Nanosuke Nutori, another noteworthy photographer of Japan's pre-war era, worked together along with graphic designers and actors to create Nippon Kobo in 1933. This group pushed to further the distance between their school of photography and the pictorialists of the time, and is cited as being a collective dedicated to unembellished portrayal of life. Through the collective's short-lived time together, Ihei continued to work on the snapshot aesthetic, and it's what became the signature of his style. The group was successful in creating a few photo exhibitions that helped advance photojournalism, but issues between Kimura and others in the group caused him to leave and start Metropolitan Studio in the spring of 1934. At this time, Kimura, along with Iwata Nakayama and Yosuho Nojima, created two new publications, a journal titled New Photography Studies and a magazine called Koga. Nakayama provided the mission statement, with an aim to fundamentally deconstruct the beauty and feel of photographs. The writings in these works exposed Japanese photographers to new innovative thinking that was coming out of the West through translations of their work. Specifically, Eugene Auger, John Hartfelt, and Edward Steichen. This heavily impacted a movement known as Sinko Shashin, meaning new photography, that motivated photographers of that era to follow Kimura in his desire to break away from pictorialism, a highly stylistic, poetic, and heavily edited type of photography that was extremely popular in the early 1900s through the 1930s. To implement the changes they wanted to see in photography, this movement turned to close-ups, snapshots, and photo montage techniques. The new methods and desires for what photography should become in Japan broke into two different schools: those who advanced, changed, and modernized photojournalism and documentary photography, and those who wanted to break away from pictorialism, but move in an even weirder direction through surrealist photography. Both camps thrived and can be seen in their further evolutions that took place in Japanese photography through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that still inform much of the highly regarded photography that continues to come out of the country to this day. Several other events during this era of Kimura's life heavily impacted his work and legacy. One that happened in the 1930s, specifically 1936, was when Kimura looked to create new work in a new place by traveling to Okinawa, a place that he had never been to before. He wanted to take photos somewhere distinctly different from the streets of Tokyo, so the paradise-like islands fit the bill. This series of photos are what some sources point to as being the images that allowed Kimura to fully find his voice as a photographer. A few years earlier on in the 1930s, he experimented with portraiture, but again, attempted to do it his own way. He created photos of several actors, dancers, and other performers of the day, but made images that portrayed them as normal people, removing anything that might highlight their status as entertainers. Another aspect that played into this is that he used softer light and closer framing to emphasize the face, and any individual face's specific features, to draw viewers into the humanity of each subject over everything else. He felt that the photographer's responsibility was not to dramatize, but to witness. This can also be seen in the 1939 series that he created titled For Japanese Painters, where he removed any of the iconic connections viewers might be able to make with these painters and simply looked to portray painters taking part in their craft. Showing people as they were in the environments that they existed in on a day-to-day basis was another key element of Kimura's work, and one of the major aspects of why he's thought of as a photographer who was able to put humanity on display over everything else. Most photographers want a Leica, or are envious of those who have one. Kimura is one of the many legends of photography to cement the brand's reputation as a great tool to create great photographs, making it impossible to talk about this photographer without also covering the impact the brand had on his work. Leica cameras became his primary tool to create photography shortly after the brand revolutionized the medium with their new compact cameras in the mid-1920s. Prior to Leica's innovations with 35mm film, most camera bodies were large, bulky, and incredibly inconvenient and unpractical for achieving types of street photography that the genre has become known for today. The small bodies, with their ease of use, made it possible for Kimura to create the kind of photography on the streets of Tokyo that he envisioned. According to his retrospective, his method was simple. He moved with the flow of the street, letting life dictate the image. This approach helped to cement his reputation as a pioneer of candid street photography in Japan. And although he's credited as a pioneer of the snapshot aesthetic as well, he believed that a good snapshot demanded both instinct and discipline. The photographer must be fully present, fully open, and ready for the world to reveal itself. His association with the brand is highlighted through various photo books that specifically connect his name to Leica, such as Leica and Ihei, which was released in 2003, and the 2006 book of his photos titled Japan Through a Leica. Some have even given him the nickname Master of the Leica Camera. A topic that comes up more than a few times in Kimura's retrospective is how much thought he put into how he portrayed women in his images. According to the retrospective, Kimura's images of women were neither idealized or objectified. He treated them with the same respect he gave all subjects. He felt strongly that women's everyday presence deserved authentic representation. He wanted to give women the same level of humanity as other subjects, and attempted to always photograph them in the real environments that they were part of on a regular basis, to observe how they experienced those environments. He focused on working women, mothers, and female students going about their daily routines and engaging in the relationships that they had, to attempt to truly show their lived experiences. This was intended to show how women were in the real world, in contrast to how they were shown in advertisements and other media of the time. During World War II, Kimura worked with propaganda publications while being stationed in Manchuria. Once the war was over, he worked to document what Japan was like through the next 10 years of Reconstruction. His book, The Show of Photographs, covers this decade of photography in 5 themed chapters: post-war sceneries, A People Resurrected, The Common People, The Japanese Islands, and Characters, in which he takes photos of people spanning different levels of Japanese society, as well as the ruins left behind in the war's wake. These images are some of the first truly street images that Kimura created, and they came as a kind of reflection of the difficulties he was facing along with everyone else in Japan at the time. He had opened a photo studio in 1945, and was forced to close it and return to freelancing since it wasn't making enough money. To carry on with his photography during this period, he often had to regularly borrow cameras and other gear to keep his work going. This is assumed to have pushed him to work even further into his grounded approach, since his own difficulties reflected the struggles faced by many on the streets of Japan at the time. Throughout this era of his life, he made regular visits to China to document the changes he saw taking place in that country as well, and how individual people were experiencing life after World War II. The focus of these images was always on the everyday person and their experience. He always tried to avoid taking images in the post-war era that could be tied to any kind of political commentary. During those years, he was also made chairman of the newly formed Japan Professional Photography Society. The significance of this is that he helped to lay the groundwork for a group that continues to impact Japanese photography today. The group was founded to support rights for photographers and to promote the medium of photography through exhibitions, networking, and job assistance, which are all things they continue to do. In the 1950s, Kimura made several trips to Europe, many of them specifically to Paris. This wasn't easy for anyone from Japan to do at the time, so it was a dream come true for him to experience the world's art capital. Many of the photos that he created on this trip were created in color, which is extremely early for the use of color in the street genre. He also met street photography legends like Henri Cartier-Bresson and Robert Duenot while he was there. The photos, many of which have the same aesthetic that looks modern, or at least as if they were created long after this time period, are sequenced in a book that was originally published in 1974 titled Paris, and in a later version titled After Image of Paris, 1950s. On this work, according to Martin Parr and Jerry Badger's book, The Photo Book, A History, Paris is notable for 2 things. Firstly, it has a distinctive color palette, composed of cool blues, grays, browns, and purples. Secondly, there's Kimura's view of the city itself, which teeters between conventional travel photography and something much more original. Kimura's Paris, like Aget's, is a nostalgic one, a city of crumbling textures and decaying structures, of courtyards and back alleys, of autumnal mist and winter gloom. At times, Kimura certainly photographs Paris as if the city were in terminal decay rather than, as so many see it, an open-air museum with some artfully distressed surfaces. This book is considered one of the major works by one of the most celebrated Japanese photographers. He was also involved in Edward Steichen's MoMA exhibition called The Family Man. This show took place in 1955. It put on display hundreds of photos from photographers all over the world. According to MoMA's website, The Family Man was a forthright declaration of global solidarity in the decade following World War II, and the exhibition was successful in what it wanted to achieve, touring the world for over 8 years and being visited by over 9 million people. The press release in the exhibition stated, "The Family Man is planned as an exhibition for photography portraying the universal elements and emotions and the oneness of human beings throughout the world. It's probably the most ambitious and challenging project photography has ever faced, and one which, I believe, the art of photography is uniquely qualified. This exhibition will require photographs, made in all parts of the world, of the gamut of life from birth to death, with emphasis on the everyday relationships of man to himself, to his family, to the community, and to the world we live in. Subject matter ranging from babies to philosophers, from the kindergarten to the university, from the child's homemade toys to scientific research, from tribal councils of primitive peoples to the councils of the United Nations. It will require photographs of lovers in marriage and childbearing, of the family unit with its joys, trials, and tribulations, its deep-rooted devotion and antagonisms. Photographs that reveal the selfness of mother love, not simply the Madonna element in mother, but all her embracing love, with the sense of security she gives to her children, and to the home she creates in its warmth and magnificence, its heartaches and exaltations." After his time in Paris, Kimura decided to return to Japan and focus his attention on a rural prefecture called Akita. According to the magazine that this work appeared in, his photographs of Akita villages are a love letter to the simplicity of rural life, capturing the textures of earth, sky, and human connection with a reverence that only Kimura could muster. This series is important to his body of work because he shows his growth in capturing images of subjects completely different from what he had done before, given the different light and spaces he was working with. These images were first published after his death in 1978, but they were said to be the driving force for his photographic soul that allowed him to create new work in Japan after World War II had devastated his desire to do so. In the 60s and 70s, while approaching the last years of his life, he explored the urban change that he continued to see taking place in Tokyo and Osaka. He saw this through factories, skyscrapers, new apartments, and places for amusement that were regularly popping up next to the old-fashioned neighborhoods and street markets. But he took these photos with a sense of documenting what was happening, for what it was, and how it related to the people living in any of these places. Believing that photography must emerge from a lived experience, he believed that sincerity of vision mattered far more than technical innovation. This mentality that he carried throughout his life allowed his work to consistently reflect that mentality, while also retaining consistent aesthetic. In 1979, Ihei Kimura made a special issue, released in December, that was dedicated to the memory of Kimura. In the issue, the most relevant voices in Japanese photography picked photos of his to use as reference to comment on his life and the work of this legendary Japanese photographer. The selected photographers included Daido Moriyama, Yutaka Takanashi, Kaizu Kite, and more. Ryoji Akiyama stated, "Kimura's photographs are the kind of thing that can't be singled out as a single piece. It's not that they're good or bad. Each photograph exudes a unique character. Looking at his portraits in particular, it feels like he was a happy man who saw 2 or 3 eras." Finally, the last note from his retrospective states, Kimura had always refused the idea that photography must be guided by rigid thought or ideology. Instead, he believed that the photographer's individual curiosity and sensitivity should lead the work. He was never interested in any kind of heavy theoretical debate, the kind that were common among photo critics, and he preferred to distance himself from those discussions entirely. Just like Kimura, how we interact with photography is entirely dependent on how we choose to interact with the regular criticisms that come with our work. If we allow ourselves to be guided by curiosity and how much we want to discover the humanity that exists in ourselves through the humanity that we put on display in our photos. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, keep developing.